space that looks kind of like an empty
team has destroyed a
so I'm
tower.
assuming because Loki is wearing the same costume here, like he's wearing that
team
same
has
outfit, that
destroyed
will
a
actually go
tower.
past these doors within an episode or two.
An
I don't know
enemy
if
has
from the
been
finale, it feels like
defeated.
it's actually going to happen sooner than that. They're making so many big reveals so much quicker than I would expect them to. And I think we're all expecting some big Wizard of Oz style reveal with the Timekeepers. They were kind of foreshadowing that in episode 1 and episode 2 when Loki's like, wait a minute, you mean I'm going to get to see the Timekeepers?
team has
That's all he could
destroyed
talk
a
about, and now that's all
tower.
that Sylvie can talk about too, making it to the Timekeepers. So wouldn't it be a grand twist if the Timekeepers themselves aren't exactly
team
what
has
we think they are?
destroyed a
Then they
tower.
next confirm my theory about what's going on with Sylvie.
mini
I did a big
to
Sylvie
survey the
explainer video
battlefield.
about how basically her whole plan here with the time
Enemy
bombs trying to
double
destroy the
kill.
sacred timeline, create all these branches, was basically to get the TVA to send all of its hunters, every possible person they could, out to try and stop these Nexus events, erase them before they became permanent, fully branching timelines. But in doing so, leaving the TVA itself extremely
team has
undefended,
destroyed
making
a
it much
tower.
easier for Sylvie to break into the Timekeeper's vault here. And that's basically what she did. This portal that she opens, that Loki then follows to the
An
crew,
enemy
is
has
right
been
back
defeated.
into the locker room that they left from earlier in the episode. She finds out that her enchantment magic doesn't work on these
Executed.
guards. Maybe there'll be a bigger reveal for that later on, why it didn't work. She erases some of them with her stun batons, like basically disintegrates them. Loki made the joke about it melting people in episode 2. Like, it's
Executed.
kind of like people are getting melted here. That's another callback to Thor Ragnarok with the melting stick
You
that the
have
Grandmaster
defeated
used.
an
Throws
enemy.
Thor out like, oh my god, what's happening here?
Double
Our Loki
kill.
grabs the daggers from Hunter B-15's locker where she threw them before the
Your
mission
team
started.
has
Then
destroyed
they
a
start fighting
tower.
back and forth. They start trading insults back and forth and fighting physically. They're
Your
supposed to be
team
pretty
has
evenly
destroyed a
matched, even though
tower.
she does acknowledge that Loki's magic is much more powerful than hers later in the episode. Like, I didn't have someone to teach me magic like you did. Loki's super curious about her, but he also kind of wants to stop her
team
because
has
that's the
destroyed
mission.
a
Stop
tower.
her, stop the variant. Renslayer comes up on them, also makes it seem like she doesn't care what happens to either of them. Like, go ahead, kill Loki,
Ultimate.
I don't care. Then he portals both of them away, and that's when they wind up
Double
on Lamentus
kill.
1. They're in the year 2077, so it's a not too distant future, but Lamentus is a Marvel reference for a planet in the Kree system that appeared during the Annihilation Conquest storyline. It's a planet where Quasar was, where he found
An
out
enemy
about
has
the
been
Annihilation wave
defeated.
that was coming, this big apocalyptic event that was going to wipe out all life in the universe. During the episode, there is a giant apocalyptic event that's happening. Sylvie says that it's actually the worst of all the apocalyptic events that he could have possibly sent them to that were stored on that special time pad. Basically, it's a glorified mining colony in Kree territory in Kree space, so a lot of the characters, the writing you see on walls, the signage, all the graffiti, that's all Kree writing. So if you're a whiz with the Kree language, let me know in the comments below if you could decode any hidden messages in any of the graffiti or any of the signage. They kind of did something similar during The Mandalorian Season 2 Episode 1 with all these Easter eggs baked into this graffiti that was on this giant wall. This is probably one of my favorite episodes so far, just because of the witty banter and the energy that they give off with each other. They have such good chemistry. Tom Hiddleston and Sophia DiMartino playing versions of Loki, each constantly trying to one-up each other, and then bonding over some of their tragic history. Both of them have very tragic pasts, but at certain points their lives did diverge. Like, there are different aspects of their upbringings that were very different. The big MacGuffin of the episode, though, is the time pad itself. Like, if we recharge it, we can totally get back to the TVA. We can escape. It kind of seems like all their tech, all the TVA's tech, runs on quantum energy just based on the color coding. The portal energy looks very similar to Iron Man's time pad that all the Avengers left when they were going on their big time heist. I know there are a lot of people that are wondering if the Timekeeper Citadel is inside the quantum realm too. I don't think that it is, but it's actually a pretty decent theory, so if I see more evidence for that, I will do a video about it. The actual quantum city inside the quantum realm is supposed to be completely different in the comics. Like, it's a completely different form of life that lives down there. It's not like a bunch of regular humans running around. But then Sylvie explains her backstory, and it's actually pretty close to what I explained during my Lady Loki video that I posted a while ago. So I had a link for that down in the description. But the idea was that she was born to Laufey, she was given the Loki name, so she was born a Loki, named Loki, but then later changed her name to Sylvie because she didn't want to be associated with the identity of Loki. Just because as bad as our Loki's upbringing was, very similar to the main version of Loki who died during Infinity War, when Sylvie explains what happened to her when she was growing up, it sounds even even worse. So up to their early childhood, their lives were pretty similar. It's just that she was born a woman instead of being born a man. Then at some point in her childhood, her version of Frigga died. They don't explain how she died, just that she did die. And because so much of the good that's inside the Loki character comes from Frigga, like someone who believed in him, taught him magic, this very gentle, caring, motherly figure in his life, Sylvie didn't have that growing up. So it kind of explains why she's so much edgier than our version of Loki. So imagine that Odin, for most of his life, was actually a pretty terrible dad. Imagine the darkest timeline version of that. That's who Sylvie grew up with. But otherwise, most of their life is fairly similar. So that's why it's so easy for each one of them to sort of peg each other from the start. Like Sylvie calls him out right at the beginning, saying, "You have no idea what you want," when he's sort of calling out her plan to just completely destroy the TVA and the Timekeepers. That also kind of confirmed my theory about what her actual plan was. Basically, kill the Timekeepers and destroy the TVA, burn it to the ground. As Loki said during episode 1, "I'm gonna burn this place to the ground." Well, technically he's not wrong if you're talking about the alternate female version of Loki here. Our Loki is still kind of in that mode where he's thirsty for the throne, like he wants the throne of Asgard so bad. Mobius was joking about that during episode 1 too, saying, "What would happen if you got the throne? Would you become king of space? What would you do if you were king of space?" And he has no answer for him because he hasn't thought it through. Sylvie completely calls him out on that too. "You have no idea what you want." They answer the question, what makes a real Loki? Independence, authority, and style, which I feel like is a callback to the fine Asgardian leather joke from episode 1, rich Corinthian leather, and when they were inside the Rocks cart and saying, "Well, usually I'd be wearing a suit," when they were trying to find Sylvie for the first time. Sylvie makes a verbal reference to Annihilation when they're walking to the next town, which is yet another Annihilation Conquest storyline reference. I know a lot of people wondering if they're ever going to do Annihilus in the Marvel movies, maybe during some space-based movie at some point. They have a bit of a moment when she tries and fails to enchant him. There are a couple moments like this during the episode too. Like, wait a minute, are they gonna kiss? What's going on here? Are they actually gonna do the Homelander scene from The Boys season 2? The head writer for Loki, before he actually got the job, actually wrote this story about this time traveler who was a fugitive and the person who was chasing him through time, and they basically wind up falling in love. So post all your jokes about Loki getting it on with himself. I don't actually think that that's going to happen during the series. I don't think that Marvel would take it to that place. Kevin Feige would probably pump the brakes before they got that far. Like, wait a minute, we're not doing Loki as a hentai series. There's the big joke with them both getting their asses handed to them by the settler because they're different plans, neither one of them works. It's all meant to foreshadow them working together in the episode in order to win. Like, neither one of them can do this by themselves using their own tactics. They both have to work together in order to survive. That's also probably going to be more foreshadowing for what happens later in the season 2. Then they work together using both of their abilities to make it past the guards onto the train. I did love the really terrible acting that Loki was doing in the episode. He went full Tropic Thunder in this episode. I'm the dude, playing the dude, pretending to be another dude. But this whole thing with the tickets and the train is meant to be a big Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade reference. Tickets, no tickets. Then even though it's kind of inconsequential to the overarching plot of the entire series, like the big narrative, I love all the new details that they reveal about their characters. Like Loki reveals that he can never sit backwards on a train. Sylvie also, because she's a Loki and they're very similar, says that I can't sit with my back to a door. But she's being just as ridiculous as he is because, as he says, there are doors on both sides, so no matter where she sits, she has her back to a door. So it's just the idea that they're both insufferable as you would expect a Loki to be. When she yells about him having only a fraction of a plan, that's a callback to Guardians of the Galaxy with Peter Quill's 12% of a plan speech. They have their big bonding moment over Frigga and magic in general, with Loki remembering all these details about his childhood. Like I said, one of the big points where their lives diverged was when her version of Frigga died when she was a child. But the title of the episode, Lamentis, in addition to being the name of the planet that they're on, the big Marvel reference, like I said, it's also the Latin verb for lamenting. So Loki is sort of lamenting the death of Frigga during this scene. They have the joke about them being adopted. Loki says, "Is that a bit of a spoiler for you?" Then she claims that they told her when she was a child. And when Loki says, "Oh, I found out eventually," he's referencing the events of the first Thor movie when he was trying to usurp the throne and disable Odin, forcing him to the Odin sleep. I love the way he brushes over that event pretty quickly. Like, "Oh, I found out eventually." Didn't tell her under what circumstances he found out. When Loki mentions Frigga showing him how to make fireworks over the water, that's obviously a setup for the fireworks scene on the train later, but it's also a reference to the fireworks over her funeral ship from Thor the Dark World. And when he says turning flowers into a frog, that's also a reference to the joke that Thor told about the time that Loki turned him into a frog when they were younger during Thor Ragnarok, which itself was a Frog Thor reference. I love the way that Loki pulls a Thor and gets super drunk, the way you would expect Thor to do. Madam, I am not drunk, I am full. It's just that I am very, very full. He also makes a joke about the candy that he drops on the floor later. That's a bit of a callback to the joke that Mobius told about there being no candy on Asgard. Like, well, we had grapes, nuts. No wonder you're so bitter. They have this big conversation about love and lovers that they've had in the past, big love interests. Sylvie claims that she does have a lover waiting for her and has been maintaining a quote-unquote metaphorical and literal long-distance relationship because of how far across time she's been jumping during her big plan here. Loki references a male lover like a beau. She doesn't correct him, saying that it's a postman. I'm thinking they're probably going to pay that off before the end of the series. Then when Sylvie asks if Loki has ever had any romances, this is also a big reveal because in the Marvel movies, they haven't really dug too deep into this. But if you're a big Loki fan, especially of real-world Norse mythology, a lot of the conversation they have here too, talking about the lovers that they've had, is accurate to real-world mythology. Sylvie says, have there been any princesses or even a prince in your life before? Loki says, a bit of both, then says he suspects the same of Sylvie. That's another reference to Loki's gender hopping and fluid sexuality. Like on his TVA file, it says gender fluid. In real-world Norse mythology, Loki jumps backwards and forth between male and female forms all the time. In fact, if you know Odin's six-legged horse here, that's right out of Norse mythology. But in Norse mythology, Loki changed himself into a horse to mate with another horse and give birth to the six-legged horse. So Loki himself sired the six-legged horse. So when they both talk about having male and female relationships, both of them, that's accurate to real-world mythology. But it's all set up for them just never having found true love. And Loki makes this big metaphor later with a dagger. Like he tries to explain love is a dagger, but ultimately, when you try to grasp it, it's not real. Maybe we'll pay that off by the end of the series as well, too. It was super fun watching him get just rip-roaring drunk, singing those Asgardian songs. Like, this is a pure Thor moment right here. He even smashes his goblet and says, another, just like Thor, during the events of the first Thor film. You also notice that when he gets really drunk, his magic wears off too. Like, he has to focus to keep his enchantment up. And I love some of the small moments that they have here too. Like, for a hot second, he really wants to eat that candy off the floor. Like, oh, it's terrible to let that go to waste. But once they have their big Indiana Jones Last Crusade moment, like, where are your tickets? Oh, here are tickets right here, and then they erupt into the fight. He even boots one of the guards out the window, just like Indiana Jones did. But you do notice that both of them have very similar fighting techniques, even though he has the twin daggers and Sylvie fights with a really large knife. They both wind up going out the window. Loki breaks the portal device beyond repair, so that's the end of the MacGuffin. And even though you think they hit rock bottom here, I feel like the end of the episode is them truly hitting rock bottom, because it's like all hope is lost as the Ark is destroyed. But I do love the way that they joke about being a hedonist. Like Loki says, I'm a hedonist. I make no apologies for that. Sylvie claims she's way more hedonistic than he is, but she just never lets get away from the mission. She's so focused on taking out the timekeepers. Love a lot of these conversations that they have during the episode. This is some of my favorite stuff from the series so far. Then Loki gets her to start talking about herself more, and she explains how enchantment works, about how she has to create the fantasy illusion using people's memories, and how it works on some people but not as good on others, just depending on how strong their minds are. And it's all set up for the reveal that all the TVA people are variants, and they just don't realize it because the timekeepers are altering their memories somehow, which is just playing into the idea that they're super sinister. And that's what Hunter C20 was talking about when she said, it's real, she wanted to go home. She wants to go back to her version of Earth that the TVA took her from when she was created in a Nexus event doing something. They don't reveal what it was she did to create the Nexus event, only that she had a similar arc to our Loki. Like, she created a Nexus event, and they said, hey, we can either disintegrate you, or you can work for us. And then at some point, they just wiped her mind. But the town with the Ark that they travel to actually has this very post-apocalyptic Blade Runner vibe to it, mixed with the design language from, say, like Nowhere or Contraxia, that pleasure planet from Guardians of the Galaxy 2. The director did say that the Blade Runner movie heavily inspired the series in a number of different ways. But like I said, there's free language, signage, writing, and graffiti all over these walls. So let me know if you could decode any Easter eggs here for those of you who can read free language. Then as the moon finally breaks apart at its equator, it almost kind of looks like a giant Pac-Man face opening up to eat them, which you could think of as another reference to Ego's 11th Planet, like a planet with a face, and then also Peter Quill forming himself into a giant Pac-Man during that same movie. Like a giant Pac-Man moon is going to eat this planet. Is actually a pretty great disaster scene, which is everything crashing down around them as they run and dodge things and fight off some of these other guards, these random people. Loki saves Sylvie a number of different times, then uses his magic to repel a giant piece of building. People were wondering what was going on here. Like, does Loki have telekinesis? He's not using telekinesis. This is magic that he's using. It's just that he's not giving off any magical energy when it's happening. But it's just another example of him showing you how powerful his magic is. Like, he is very powerful, and several times during the episode, Sylvie kind of acknowledges that.